Hello and welcome to Tradecraft Security Weekly. I'm your host, Beau Bullock, and this is episode number 28. And this week, I'm going to be talking to you about some of the best tools and techniques that I saw come out of Black Hat and DEF CON of 2018. So if you have watched some of the previous episodes, you might know that I did this last year as well. Last year, I actually made it to Black Hat. I was at Arsenal last year and found a lot of really interesting new tools and techniques. And so I thought I'd share some of those. This year, unfortunately, I didn't actually make it out there, but I kept a very close eye from afar on some of the new things that were being released, as well as, I had some coworkers that were there that I hit up and asked if they saw anything cool. And so that turned into this list of a few different tools and techniques that I saw kind of come out of Black Hat and DEF CON this year that I thought would be interesting to share and might be worth adding to your red team or pen testing arsenal. So, without further ado, let's jump into some of these new tools and techniques. And these are not by any means like, a definitive list of cool stuff that came out of Black Hat and DEF CON. These are just some things that I thought I would share that I thought were interesting and might be useful for the toolkit, for your tradecraft, since this is Tradecraft Security Weekly. All right, so the first tool is called ZigDiggity. So if you're familiar with the Zigbee framework, then you'll know that there really haven't been a whole lot of tools or frameworks developed for exploiting or pen testing Zigbee-based services. So Zigbee Pen Test Toolkit, this is something that's developed by Bishop Fox. And, if you want to go hack some garage doors, this is where you want to probably look. So this toolkit actually introduces previously unpublished attack patterns as well. So there's some new stuff in here. First off, there's the ACK attack that attempts to cause Zigbee endpoint devices to malfunction. So if you want to break your garage door, that might be your go-to. If you want to force an endpoint device to try to connect to a user-specified PAN ID, you can use this new rejoin black hole attack. And this toolkit's designed to be used with the Killer Bee framework on these USB sticks. I have a picture here of one of the compatible models. I'm going to include all the links to all of the tools in the show notes, as well as like below the YouTube video. So like if you want to read more about any of these, just check out the links below. So that is the Zigbee ZigDiggity Pen Test Toolkit from Bishop Fox. Humble Chameleon is the next tool. So this is a tool that is designed to man-in-the-middle services that have multi-factor authentication. Now, this is something that we've talked about before on Tradecraft Security Weekly, not specifically this tool, but the idea of man-in-the-middling two-factor authentication, because one of our own at Black Hills InfoSec, Mike Felch, developed a tool called Cred Sniper, which actually, if you want to read more about Cred Sniper, he just released a blog post this week. Excellent blog post on Cred Sniper, and we did a Tradecraft episode on it as well. But this is similar in that you set up a phishing domain and you phish the two-factor credentials from your victim. So this one is written in Node.js. The interesting thing about this one as well is that it uses two domains to hide any malicious content. So you have like an initial upfront domain that any web scanners and that kind of stuff would see and not find anything malicious, but a secondary domain with the actual phishing pages are only triggered with certain web requests. So that's Humble Chameleon if you need another tool for your phishing toolkit. The WHID Injector, WHID WHID. So that stands for Wireless Human Interface Device. And so the Wireless Human Interface Device was developed by Luca Bongiorni. And the interesting thing about this, so if you're familiar with the rubber ducky, right, the Hack5 rubber ducky, it's a human interface device, meaning that whenever you plug it into a computer, it has the ability to send keys to that computer. So that differs from a USB device in that, with USB devices, companies can block those. Like if you have like a DLP program, a lot of times they block the use of USBs through policies so that people can't just copy stuff off the network. But a human interface device would be very, very difficult because it looks just like a keyboard to block. So with a human interface device, like a rubber ducky, you can program it to run commands. So essentially the idea would be if I find an open computer, I could plug in the HID device and it will run those commands and maybe give me a shell or dump some hashes or something. The interesting thing about this specific device, this WHID injector, is that this one also has a wireless chip on it as well. So you're actually able to connect to this USB device over wireless. You can plug it in, connect to it over wireless from afar, and run commands interactively. So you can actually like run scripts interactively with the computer because you literally have wireless like command terminal access at that point. And it's cheap. It's only $16, so you can go buy it. So go check out the WHID injector. All right, Chiron. So there were actually a couple tools at Black Hat Arsenal that were called Chiron. This is the IPv6 security assessment framework version of Chiron. This one is developed by Antonios Atlasis, and it is interesting in that we don't have a whole lot of tools for assessing IPv6 at this point either. So having another tool in the toolkit for IPv6 scanning and having attack modules is very useful. I've gone up against a few environments that have a lot of IPv6 space, and it's an interesting interesting problem to try to go against whenever you're trying to assess IPv6 space. So this one will allow for easily crafting arbitrary IPv6 headers chain to help evade IDS and IPS or firewalls or any other security devices. It also incorporates its own IPv6 sniffer, and it doesn't use any of the actual OS stack. So another tool worth checking out there. Okay, ExchangeRelayX. This one is probably my favorite thing I've seen come out of Black Hat and DEF CON this year, maybe. So if you followed me, if you've seen any of the stuff I've developed in the past, then you'll know that I developed a tool called Mail Sniper, which interacts with Exchange Web Services. And this tool is similar in that it's a tool that allows you to interact with Exchange Web Services, but it actually gives you a full-on OA-like interface to Exchange Web Services. So William Martin, aka QuickBreach, developed this tool that if you are able to phish a user into navigating to your site, it actually relays that NTLM authentication from the user to the Exchange server, to the EWS portal, and gives you this beautiful Outlook-like interface that you can kind of see here in the slide here. It looks, you can click through emails, you can send emails, you can download the GAL. It's literally like having access to OA directly. So very, very cool tool. ExchangeRelayX, if you want to actually just phish your way into having an OA interface. hideNsneak. So this is a tool from Mike Hodges that assists in managing attack infrastructure for pen testers and red teamers. And so this is something that I think is super useful. We as pen testers spend a lot of time setting up and tearing down infrastructure, and to have something that can help quickly set up, virtual machines, domain fronting, Cobalt Strike, API gateways, firewalls, all that stuff automated, it will take a lot of time out of the setup process and put more emphasis on the actual pen testing. So this is hideNsneak. It also has the ability to deploy remote installations of Burp Collaborator, Cobalt Strike, SOCAT, Let's Encrypt certs, GoFish, and SQL Maps. So check that out if you are interested in deploying your infrastructure a little bit faster. Trommel. So this one's really cool. So if you do any sort of embedded device research, or if you're trying to analyze IoT devices, this is a tool that will actually sift through embedded device files to identify potential vulnerable indicators. So this actually comes from CERT, and it reminds me a little bit of what Benwalk does. If you've ever used Benwalk before, it finds different headers and pulls out different files and looks for things like SSH keys, IP addresses, URLs, SSL keys, email addresses, shell scripts. All kinds of interesting information from the actual firmware of a device. So if you're doing any sort of analysis like that, Trommel might be a tool for you to add to your toolkit. Cache poisoning and Param Miner. So this was a very, very, very interesting attack that came from James Kettle. So Albino Wax is his handle. So cache poisoning in itself is not a brand new web attack, but the way that James went about doing his research and determining ways of discovering it and ways of exploiting it makes it way, way, way more interesting, and creates a lot more risk for a lot more organizations around the world. So anytime I see like a new web attack, I have to go like learn a lot about it, because I love new web attacks. I love things like this because, whenever we're on a web assessment, a lot of organizations are doing a pretty good job of nailing down a lot of the common vulnerabilities. This might be something that they miss. And so what this is that a lot of the big websites these days use some form of caching to cache their services, so that, depending on where you are geographically, they don't have to load up the content for every single page that every single user hits from their server. It gets cached from some sort of caching mechanism. And the idea is that if I can inject something malicious into that cache as an attacker, then a victim who navigates to that site will get served up my malicious cache, and then something bad will happen to them. So James figured out that he actually developed this tool called Param Miner, and is able to use it to find unkeyed inputs in websites, and kind of developed a methodology for exploiting those unkeyed inputs and figuring out if he could do things like store cross-site scripting attacks in a cache for a web page. So he basically put together this entire presentation and tool to help assist researchers and pen testers in locating these vulnerabilities where a site might actually cache malicious input. So I recommend going and watching his video. So he actually spoke about this at Black Hat first, but then there's a video from B-Sides Manchester out there that is worth watching as well, that he goes through this entire process. Also read the blog that's attached here to learn more about Param Miner and cache poisoning attacks. Merlin. So this is a tool from Russell Van Tool, aka Neon Dog. That is it's a cross-platform post-exploitation HTTP2 command and control server, and so he's had this out for a while. But he added in a new feature that I thought was really interesting. So there's support now for the QUIC protocol. So Google's QUIC protocol is the Quick UDP Internet Connection. I have not seen any other tools utilizing QUIC. I mean, there might be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this would be one of the first tools to actually use QUIC as a C2 mechanism, which is very interesting. I always find new C2 techniques interesting, like if there's a shell over ICMP or DNS or any different protocol other than TCP, because a lot of times those protocols aren't being watched as much as your typical HTTP or HTTPS traffic, or typical TCP traffic for that matter. So this one actually allows you to perform C2 over QUIC, which is very, very interesting. So definitely go check out Merlin if you are interested in an interesting C2 command and control platform. The last tool I'm going to talk about for today is ADRecon. So this one, I believe he actually released in November of 2017, but he spoke about it at Arsenal as well. And so this one came from Prashant Mahajan. And this one is a PowerShell tool that extracts various artifacts out of an AD environment. So it's very similar to what PowerView does, if you're familiar with PowerView from Harmjoy. This is a PowerShell tool that uses Microsoft's RSAT, or if you're not attached to a domain, like if you're on a non-domain joined computer, you can use this tool to talk directly to a DC via LDAP as well. You would have to have credentials to log into the DC, to actually talk to the domain. But it obtains various information such as forest, domain trust, password policies, users, OUs, lapsed passwords if you're actually like an admin, or BitLocker recovery keys if you're an admin. So another PowerShell tool to do some ADRecon is ADRecon. And that is it for my Black Hat and DEF CON kind of summary episode of Tradecraft Security Weekly. Hope you enjoyed it. And if there are any other cool tools you guys saw, feel free to tweet at me, because I'd love to see if there's anything interesting I might have missed. And feel free to tweet me. I'm on Twitter at DaftTac, and I shall see you next week. Have a great weekend.